Let's start with Alexander, who does ask a Brandon Aiyuk question. Says, thoughts on the reports the Niners want Highsmith and Dan Moore Jr. for Brandon Aiyuk?
So I just saw the reports this morning. It was from Kaboli. It's not a report, it's a speculation. Let's make that very clear, that he says that they would want Brandon Aiyuk, or they would want Alex Highsmith and potentially Dan Moore on top of other things for a Brandon Aiyuk trade. I think Alex Highsmith makes a lot of sense. If you want to give up Dan Moore, go give up Dan Moore. Who cares? There's nothing emotionally attaching you to Dan Moore whatsoever if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Highsmith is a little bit more difficult. Highsmith's a very valuable piece to this defense. Your defense takes a significant step backwards if he's not a part of the roster. I don't want to say on the field because you have Nick Herbig, but now you're just going to go into the season with two outside linebackers and find yourself in the same position that you found yourself in 2 years ago, where it's just two guys and you hope everybody stays healthy when chances are that they're not. That just doesn't seem to work. That being said, Alex Highsmith being on the roster compared to Brandon Aiyuk being on the roster, Aiyuk brings a lot more upside than Highsmith does, raises the bar and the ceiling of what the Pittsburgh Steelers are much more than Highsmith does. So if you're going to compare apples to apples, that makes sense. I don't know if the Steelers would be open to that. It would have to lower the price tag of the rest of it pretty significantly. So you'd have to go from a first round, maybe a second round pick, to Highsmith and like a fourth, Highsmith and a third best I get. But if you're giving up Dan Moore and Alex Highsmith, I'd give up a fourth max at that point and be comfortable. Would you make that trade? Would you go Alex Highsmith, Dan Moore, and a fourth round pick for Brandon Aiyuk?
I mean, it keeps the top of your draft intact next year, which is a nice little bonus. And I will say you make a great point with the drop off from Brandon Aiyuk to I almost did it again. Jesus, Van Jefferson.
I know.
The drop off from there to there is much more drastic than the drop off from Highsmith to Herbig. But at the same time, Highsmith has proven to be a Pro Bowl caliber at times outside linebacker, and the Steelers are going to be relying heavily on their defense. Now, again, if you get Aiyuk, that raises the offense to still be potentially top 10 with him, and that defense without Highsmith is still likely in that top 10 range. So I don't know. It's not one that I would have thought of beforehand. It's not something I would have speculated beforehand. So shout out to Kaboli for that. It would certainly be a conversation. It's hard to determine. I would say that at the end of the day, if you're going for a Super Bowl this year, that gets you closer to a Super Bowl. So if that's your all-time goal, then you do it. You do it. You don't love it, but you do it.
Yeah, you don't feel good. That's the thing, is you don't feel good about it. I'd feel better giving up a first round pick. I really truly would. I'd feel a lot better about the Pittsburgh Steelers' future and right now if you just gave up a first round pick, because you have contingency plans. You have Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, who you could re-sign to a 1-year deal and make that work next season, or a 2-year deal or whatever. You could go into free agency and try to find a quarterback. You can make a move to try to trade up for a first round quarterback. It's tough to say you're going to find another Alex Highsmith. It's really tough to say that. That's not a guarantee. And you have Nick Herbig. I get that. But then you got to go find another Nick Herbig. That's not a guarantee either. That's a massive dip for the Steelers. Risk reward. Yeah, if this is whatever, you could fill it and you don't feel good about it. If Alex Highsmith was on the last year of his deal, I'd feel much better about the situation. But you're losing a piece of your defense for the future and right now for somebody that definitely very clearly raises your bar to Super Bowl level, but also hurts your entire plan of how you're going to move forward and currently work with things. I don't know. I'd rather go first round pick for Brandon Aiyuk than Alex Highsmith. And I know that's crazy, but I think it leaves you in a better spot to go try to compete this season and make up the ground next year than to give up guys.
Luke Nessie has a question here about Aiyuk, saying, do you guys think the locker room would be better with somebody like Sutton as compared to Brandon Aiyuk?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think Sutton's a great guy, and I've heard really good things about him, but I've also heard really good things about Aiyuk as well. I've heard that he is a good teammate for the most part. He's got his issues right now. How does that compare to, you have a Brock Purdy in San Francisco compared to a Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh, who's going to control the locker room a lot better? You have a Mike Tomlin compared to a Kyle Shanahan. You have an Arthur Smith compared to a Kubiak. It's a different situation. It's more grounded coaching and leadership, I believe. So, and I'm not like, there's George Kittle's in San Francisco, who's one of the, and Trent Williams, but there are names in Pittsburgh that I think help that as well. I'm not totally worried. I also think that a lot of that calms down once he gets paid. So I wouldn't be super concerned about his attitude. That being said, I mean, the answer is Sutton, but Aiyuk raises your bar a hell of a lot more.
Let's go to another Aiyuk question here from Vibin with the Dog saying, would they be comfortable trading for Aiyuk when they don't have a plan at quarterback past this season? Do you think that gives them any hesitation?
I think it does give them some hesitation, but I also believe that they'd make that move happen. I don't think that they'd have any issues or pullback to say, oh, well, we don't have a quarterback in 2025. I agree with you, and I think they have that in the back of their heads, but I also believe that the risk reward is too high. You go get your wide receiver, you go win a Super Bowl this year. That's the plan. The Steelers are trying to win a Super Bowl in 2024. They'll focus on 2025 when they get there. That's how teams who win Super Bowls win Super Bowls. So I believe that they'd risk it and say we'd figure it out next year, whether it's Russ, Justin, or we have to figure out an alternative route. Even if it's in the second round, I think you can make that work.